Hey yo, I'm Miss Linnea Lark. Welcome back to the third video in this lab bowl series. I'm so excited because today we're going to glaze it. Woo! In this video, I'll teach you a bit about glazes and how to properly use them. But a lot of the information in this video is specific to how we run our studio and the norms and processes we use in my classroom. If you have any glazing tricks that you'd like to share, please feel free to leave a comment in this video below so that we can all learn from you. All right, let's talk glazes. Glazes are basically liquid glass that can be painted onto ceramic pieces to make them beautiful, shiny, glossy, and watertight. Glazes are made from powdered minerals and man-made materials. Once fired, glazes turn into a glass coating on your ceramic wares. Glazes are amazing. However, they do have some drawbacks. Glazes are unpredictable. No two pots that were glazed the exact same way will ever really look identical. Glazes kind of remind me of like an emotional woman, wildly erratic and unpredictable. Don't get your panties in a bunch. I'm an emotional woman. I get to say that. Glazes tend to drip, bleed, fuse together, and even run. And they're impossible to fully control. These qualities make them gorgeous. However, this also means that glazes aren't for drawing detailed paintings, something like flowers or hearts, or people on your pots. Your glazed flower is more likely to look like a blurred, dripping kaleidoscope of weird colors than a flower with detailed petals. In today's demo, you'll be able to see just how much the firing warps the glazes and alters the design on my bowl. When glazing, I tell my students to cross their fingers, say a prayer, and hope for the best. It's best not to have expectations of what your glaze work is going to look like, because you just never know what's going to happen. Each glaze has its own personality. It's our job as ceramicists to get to know the glazes and how they behave, and then use them accordingly in ways we think that would look nice. Some glazes are transparent, while others are opaque. Some glazes run and drip and bleed, while other glazes dominate and don't fuse well with other glazes. So we have a test tile wall in the classroom where you can deduce some of this information before you even try them. Let's talk test tiles. Each test tile was cut out, stamped, and fired into ceramic. Then they were each underglazed white on the bottom half, and then black on the bottom left corner. I don't want to go into too much detail about underglazes right now, except to say that the black corner helps us understand how transparent or opaque the glazes are. Notice that some glazes are super transparent. You can clearly see the black triangle beneath it, while other glazes are very opaque and hard to see the black triangle through it. Also notice that the right side of our tiles that has been stamped helps us understand how carving and 3D embellishments in our clay will look with each glaze on top. Notice that some glazes are so thick and opaque that it almost totally covers up the stamped detail. These glazes may not be wise to use on carved or textured surfaces. It just kind of erases it. We can also tell that some glazes turn a different color on the corners and edges, which is another interesting characteristic to look out for in the glazes. One thing that our test tiles will not tell you is how well they fuse with other glazes and how much they drip. You can learn these two qualities with time and experience. Before we can paint anything, we need to prep our bowls. Make sure your hands are clean anytime that you're touching your ceramics, because the oils in your skin and even lotion that you could have put on earlier in the day will cause glazing defects. Next, I search my bowl for any visible areas of sloppy craftsmanship or sharp edges. It's okay, we all make mistakes, but I gotta take my bowl outside and sand down any imperfections or sharp areas. This is really crucial, as sharp areas, once they're glazed, they will turn into sharp glass areas and they will be able to cut you. So double check that everything is smooth. After, you'll need to dunk your bowl or run it under some water to clean off all that dust. Dust is another cause of glaze defects. If there is dust between your bowl and the glaze has a hard time adhering to the bowl and it can cause shivering, where the glaze chips off of your pot. That's no bueno. And now, maybe the hardest part, we gotta wait for our bowls to completely dry. When our pots are saturated with water and we paint glazes onto a damp pot, the glaze takes an eternity to dry. So I recommend that as soon as you have a piece get out of the kiln, You sand it right away and then wash it right away so that it can be ready to glaze the very next class. Let's talk about how to apply these glazes. There are all kinds of ways to apply glazes to your pot, but today we're going to focus on using a paintbrush to brush glazes onto our bowls. My favorite brushes to use for large areas are the medium bamboo brushes. They absorb a lot. After using your brushes, wash them out really, really well. Make sure you don't have any glaze hiding deep in the bristles that will leak onto the next person's pot while they're using the brush. It's a good idea to wash your brushes before you even use them, honestly. Sometimes a glaze will seep out from the inside of the bamboo handle and it'll ruin everything. So make sure your brushes are clean when you're done and before you use them. After you wash out your brushes, lay them flat while they're drying. That way water doesn't soak into the core of the brush and corrode the glue, keeping the bristles in place. Never leave your paintbrush in the water. That's like the worst thing you can do. Your bristles will get bent if you leave them like that for too long. And the glue inside will corrode. And the wooden handles will absorb the moisture and start to crack. It's just don't do it. When you put your brushes back on the shelf, make sure that the bristles are always up. If you put the bristles down, you're going to ruin the little bristles. Nobody wants to paint with a bent U-shaped bristle. Never. And I mean never. Leave your brushes at the sink. If you know where to find them, then I know that you know where to put them back. You better step on it. Glaze must be applied to ceramics with the correct thickness for it to work properly and actually turn into glass. If glazes are put on too thin, they will not fully turn to glass. As you can see here, this vase has patchy application because the glaze has been applied too thin. On the other hand, if glazes are put on too thick, the glaze will likely run off of your work and fuse it to the kiln shelf, which will more than likely break your pot. Too much glaze can cause a lot of problems, which I will show you a little later on. So, for the best results, make sure your glaze is the consistency of pancake batter, thick but still drippy. And then you can brush 3 layers of your glaze onto your work. Wait for each layer to dry completely before you paint the next layer. If you do not wait for each layer to dry, you will end up with patchy application like this vase that didn't actually turn to glass. If you'd like to see a tutorial on how I reconstitute our glazes and get them liquid again, click the card in the top right corner of your screen. Fusing glazes. Remember I told you that when 2 glazes touch each other, they tend to bleed into each other or fuse together, making an all-new looking effect. This is what I call glaze fusing. We're going to be fusing 3 different glazes together on our bowls, so I have some useful tips for you. When fusing, a few different variables matter. First, whichever glaze goes on thicker or with more layers becomes more dominant. Get it? More glaze, more dominant. Secondly, whichever glaze goes on top tends to be more dominant. Also, dark colors and opaque glazes tend to be more dominant. Notice these 2 test tiles I created. Both were using the same 2 glazes, but I altered how many layers and which glaze was on top. When fusing, it's a good idea to consider which glaze is darkest, thickest, and on top to figure out what it's going to look like. Glazing journals. As you might be able to tell, glazing is difficult, and each glaze has its own personality and characteristics. You might think some glazes look better with certain glazes and worse with other glazes. The only way to truly learn how to glaze well is to jump right in. Give it a try, and then document your findings so that we can remember what you learned. We will be documenting our glazing process in our glazing journals for a grade. Yay! If you'd like to buy yourself one of these handy-dandy glazing journals, I'll leave a link to my Teachers Pay Teachers site in the description below. To my in-person students, this year I am starting a communal database for all of our findings. If you upload a picture of your glazing journal recipe, a picture of your glazed pot before it was fired, and a picture of your glazed pot after it was fired, I will give you a prize. And even if your pot wasn't to your liking, as long as you upload all 3 pics, you'll be able to get that prize. It's important to have excellent recipes and stinky recipes in the database so that we can all learn from each other's victories and each other's mistakes. Let's get into the project. Today we're going to play with the glazes and fuse them together in order to learn some of the glazes' characteristics firsthand. You will be overlapping 3 different glazes on your bowl to create a fused effect in at least one area. You should creatively think of an interesting way to brush your design onto your pot using 3 different glazes. Remember to overlap all 3 glazes in at least one area of your bowl. You could paint dots or spots. You could paint lines, patterns, or even give your bowl a multicolored drippy rim. Don't be afraid to do something wild. But don't forget, the whole point is to overlap those 3 glazes somewhere and play with the fusing. Don't just place 3 different glazes side by side next to each other. They must all overlap each other in at least one area of your bowl. Glazing. All right, let's get into it. Now it's time to put all of this into practice. As I continue this video, I'll be showing you how to glaze and how to fill out your glazing journal simultaneously. Yeah, you're welcome. Let's get our tools out. Once your bowl is smooth, clean, dry, and ready to glaze, it's time to get all of your glazing tools out. You'll need your bowl that you're going to glaze, a banding wheel, your first glaze of choice, a bowl full of water and a sponge, a paintbrush, your glazing journal, and an empty clean bowl to pour your glaze into. If your bowl has been sitting for a while after you washed it, you can use our electric blower outside to dust it real quick. You shouldn't need to wash it again. Glazing journal. Let's start with our glazing journal. I fill in my name, period, and the name of our project, which is Slab Bowl. In section 2, I draw a large, simple, but clear line drawing of my project. Section 3 is all about finding a color scheme on Pinterest that you like and can use on your bowl. I usually try to find a color scheme that includes the glaze that I know I want to use. So I choose patina as my number 1 pick. When I went over to Pinterest, I chose light green color schemes. And then I found one I liked. I then double-checked that we have glazes that are similar to the colors in the color scheme. And we do. So I'll be using patina, Dutch blue, and Cascade white on my bowl. I go ahead and color the color scheme into section 3 with colored pencils and hold on to those colored pencils, as I will need to fill out the other sections of my glazing journal as I go. In part 4, we'll be documenting our process. As you glaze your pot, you will fill out each step in your process like a recipe. I'm going to start with 3 layers of patina all over my bowl. Now, remember, when brushing on your glazes, you must have a minimum of 3 coats of glaze for it to turn to glass. But I still need to add 2 more glazes. This means in some areas, I'm going to have at least 5 areas of glaze. I am intentionally adding too much glaze to my bowl so that I can show you what happens and how to fix it later. I probably should have started with only 2 layers of patina everywhere, but I needed to make a problem for us to solve later. I go ahead and write out the glaze name, which is patina. In the application column, I plan to brush those layers on, so I put brush. And I document that I'm going to apply 3 coats. The note section can also be used for when my bowl comes out of the firing. I'll make observations in the note sections. Things like glaze was applied too thick, or glaze doesn't fuse well, etc. But I also use the note section to tally my layers as I finish them. This is because some of you may not be able to finish how many coats you're planning on doing in one class period. You may have to wrap it up and pack it up till the next class, and it's very likely that you'll forget how many layers you've already painted. This is a real problem, because if you don't get 3 layers everywhere, is your bowl going to turn actually to glass and glaze? No, it is not. So you got to keep track of how many layers you've done as you go. I then color the color key square green, and then color my bowl in the areas I plan to brush patina on. Since I am doing 3 coats everywhere with patina, I color the entire bowl green. And now it's time to actually glaze that bowl. Glazing. I start by putting my hand on the top of the lid of my glaze and the other on the bottom of the tub of my glaze. And then I shake, 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 shake. My glaze is really, really good. This makes sure that the glaze is well mixed. I get the patina glaze from the glazing shelf. We have exactly 1 tub of each glaze out at a time. If somebody already has your desired glaze out and they're using it on their piece, it's your job to check the tables to see who has it out. Or if you can't find it, you can ask me and I'll yell out, "Who's got the patina?" If someone already has your glaze out and is using that glaze, no problem. You can take your clean bowl over to them and pour some of that glaze for you to use at your desk. Whatever you don't use will just get poured back into the patina container when you're all finished with your glazing. But make sure that whatever bowl you choose from the sink area is clean so we don't get any contamination between glazes. I then brush my first layer onto my pot. Make sure you're not shy with the glaze. You really want to dunk the brush into the glaze so that it applies really thick. If you start brushing it on and it applies in a scratchy kind of a way, you need more glaze on your brush. I like to glaze in a sequence. Notice that I start with the inside floor, go to the inside walls, to the rim, and then the outside walls. When you're glazing the outside, do not get glaze on the feet or the bottom of the pot. We will do those areas later, and we don't want to over-apply the glaze. When glazing, some of the glazes might go on super thick and lumpy. Don't worry. When they get fired, the glazes will melt and flatten out. But if the glaze goes on way too super thick, you probably only need 2 coats because you don't want it to stick to the kiln shelf when it runs off your piece. I allow my first layer to completely dry before I go on to my second layer. The first layer will dry pretty quickly, but as you go, each layer takes a little bit longer to dry, so don't run out of patience. You can speed the drying time up by using a fan or a blow dryer. We have 3 to 4 blow dryers available in the room, and you can set those up at the wedging table. But not everybody is going to be able to blow dry their piece every time. When blow drying, it's important to keep the blow dryer about a foot away from your pot and keep it moving. If you dry the glaze too quickly and too closely, it gets really way too hot, and the glaze tends to shrink too fast and it can crack and even chip off of your piece. If you have this problem, you can usually fix it by sanding the cracks with one of your fingers. And now I'm on to the second layer. I do the floor, the inside walls, the rim, and then the outside walls. I let the second coat completely dry, and then I go on to my third coat. Once my third coat is dry, I place my bowl upside down on eggshells. Make sure those eggshells are clean though. This way I don't chip or damage the glaze on the rim of my bowl. And now I can glaze the bottom. Notice all the areas that I foolishly already glazed. I shouldn't have started glazing parts I couldn't see at the time. In the end, I ended up putting way too much glaze on my feet, so don't make that mistake like I did. Now, I just glazed 3 layers of patina onto the bottom. Careful to allow for each layer to dry before starting the next layer. Now I have to decide how I'm going to add the 2 other glazes to this pot. Not only that, but all 3 glazes have to overlap in at least one significant area so that they all fuse together. I decided to draw some random organic shapes on the inside and outside. The pencil lines will burn out in the kiln, so no need to worry if you make a mistake while you're drawing. Just ignore it. I pop back over to my glazing journal and I choose my next glaze, Dutch blue. I intend to brush 1 layer onto each shape to start with. I go ahead and document that in my glazing journal. I also make sure to color the shapes on my drawing in section 2. My next glaze is Cascade White. I'm excited about this one. It's my first time using it. It's supposed to be super drippy and make your glaze fusions even more exciting. Perfect for this project. I didn't want to apply too much though, just in case it drips a lot. I already have 4 layers in those areas, so I painted just 1 layer at the core of each of my Dutch blue shapes. While that's drying, I go back to my glazing journal and add on the last layer of Dutch blue. I document my application on the log and also with colored pencils on the drawing of mine. And then I paint the last layer of Dutch blue onto my bowl. Once everything is dry, I carefully flip my bowl over and sponge away any glaze that is on the bottom of my feet. You cannot allow glaze to touch anything on the kiln shelf. When glazes get hot and cherry red in the kiln, anything that they touch, they'll stick to permanently. This is the number 1 reason why I will reject your pots at a firing is because you have not sponged off the bottom of your pots. Now, I'm done glazing my pot. What is the number one rule that I broke on my pot? Does anybody remember? That's right. I applied a total of 6 layers. Do you remember how many layers I recommend? That's right. Just 3 and no more than 4. I have applied way, way, way too much glaze. I have done this so that I can show you why it's so important to not over apply your glazes. I'll show you the disastrous results soon enough. But for now, let's clean it all up. Now that my bowl is all finished and its feet are all clean, I need to clean up all the tools that I have used as well. I wash out my brushes extra well until I am sure that all the glaze from the core of the brush is cleaned. I lay my brush sideways to dry while I put everything back away where I got it from. I put my remaining glazes back into their tubs. I clean off my banding wheel so that there is no glaze or gunk on it for the next person. I make sure that my glaze tub is clean without drip marks running down the sides. If everyone using a glaze leaves a drippy mess, by the end, it will all end up looking like this. And then the lids don't want to fit on properly. And this will make the glazes dry out even faster. It's just a nightmare. Just clean off the edges with a sponge. If you have a ton of glaze on the inside of your tub's lid, you may end up needing a spatula or spoon to scrape the extra glaze back into the tub. The spoons and spatulas can be found behind the discontinued glazes shelf on the top shelf. I also make sure to wash out my bowls in the sink, putting the sponge back where it belongs. I place my banding wheel back on the shelf where it belongs, and I make sure to put it as far back as I can reach so that all of the banding wheels will fit back on the shelf. I return my brushes back to their place, bristles up, and I make sure I put the correct brushes in the correct bins. Once I'm all cleaned up, I load my bowl on the glazing rack. This is the second rack, not the first one. The first one's a bisque firing rack. The second is a glaze firing rack. I avoid the top 2 shelves because those are designated for underglaze pieces, and I don't have any underglaze on my piece. I then place my bowl as far back on the glaze shelf as possible so that other students don't knock or touch my bowl when they're loading their pieces on the shelf. Your work is safest as far back as you can place it. And then my bowl gets fired. Hip hip hooray! It's looking pretty great. Look how much that cascade white dripped. My shapes are free, flowing down the walls, and are almost unrecognizable to how I painted them on. Look how much that they changed. But I love it. The colors look great, and the flecks of brown with the patina are so pretty. Woohoo! After admiring my bowl, I take this opportunity to write out any notes about my finished piece in my glazing journal. I noted that I applied too much glaze, that a little bit of Cascade White goes a long way, it is super drippy, and that patina has some really gorgeous brown flecks in it. This is all good to note in our glazing journal. The only downer is that I over-applied that glaze and it dripped down my feet right to the kiln shelf. Luckily, it easily detached from the kiln shelf, but it left behind blades of glass all over the feet. Not very ergonomic. Not to mention the scratches that this would leave on your grandmother's antique dining table, or the blood that you will inevitably spill when you touch it. Oof. All things considered, even though mine is sharp and I have to grind the bottoms, sometimes the glaze doesn't release from the kiln shelves as easily as mine did. It chips the actual bowl or piece of ceramics when I pry it off of the kiln shelf. I was lucky that my feet actually stayed intact. You might not be so lucky like this person. Oh no, look how their foot got totally chipped off. All right, you guys, that's all I got for you today. If you'd like to see how we grind down and care for these running glaze issues, come back for the next video where I'm going to teach you how to grind the edges and make our pot safe. If you'd like to purchase the bowl template to make your own slab bowl or my glazing journal, please check the link in the description below that will take you to my Teachers Pay Teachers account. And you can buy it from me and I get your money. If you'd like to purchase any of the tools I showed you in this video, you can check out my glazing list on the Amazon affiliate page. And if you buy off of my list, Amazon's going to give me a wee bit of money. Hip hip hooray. Thank you guys for watching. I hope all of your glaze creations look amazing. Happy day.